pimp is crystal. It's like playing out of a wine glass, bitch. So be patient. Madison Crystal City in the 1800s. We just made history tonight.
That's Lizzo, classically trained flutist, singer, rapper, songwriter, all that. She played James Madison's crystal flute on stage for her fans in DC, and they went wild. But the problem was that moment of twerk. Let's watch that one moment again that made so many heads explode, just in case you missed it. Heads exploded. Let's first talk about how she got this opportunity. James Madison's flute from like 1800s. Wow, this is crazy. Details here. The flute had been lent to her by Carla D. Hayden, the first African-American and first woman to lead the Library of Congress. The moment came together after Dr. Hayden asked Lizzo on Friday to visit the library's flute collection, the largest in the world with about 1,700 of the instruments. Dr. Hayden wrote on Twitter to Lizzo, "We would love for you to come see it and even play a couple when you're in DC next week. Like your song, they are good as hell." So Lizzo, of course, jumped at that opportunity. Who wouldn't? And she played it at the Library of Congress. Let's look at that.
I can play it or no?
Yes.
Oh, my lipstick doesn't. Right? That's what I want to know.
We'll see. Oh, we'll see.
Beautiful. Ben Shapiro didn't agree though. He's more thinking about the content though. Let's listen to what Ben Shapiro had to say. He was one of the first heads that exploded.
The reason the clip is viral is the contrast between a person twerking and the idea of an extraordinarily classy instrument, a historic instrument that speaks to sort of the gentility of America's founders being brought into a context that is vulgar. It's the vulgarization of American history. Again, Lizzo did both, and only one of those clips went viral. And so if you notice that, then you're very, very bad. If you notice that, then this means that you're some sort of racist, or it means that you don't want black people playing the flute or something. No, I just don't want people twerking with historic instruments. By the way, I'd be similarly offended as a violinist if there was a Stradivarius. Somebody had a Strad, and that Strad was lent out to a musician who then proceeded to twerk on the Strad. I would also be insulted because it turns out that great art should not be degraded. Great art, American history, they should not be degraded by juxtaposition with vulgarity. That should not be a controversial position, but we've now reached the point in American life where nearly everything is a controversial position.
That seems odd because you're talking about being a controversial issue. If you're upset at everything being a controversial issue, maybe you should stop being upset about everything and turn it into a controversy. I'm actually okay with this being a controversy, but I want to break down its reasons why people are probably mad about this. And maybe you should analyze whether or not you should really be mad about this. Before I get to that though, because he's talking about the gentility of our founding fathers. Keep that in mind. Also, the degradation of our American history, the vulgarity heaped upon our American history. I think you guys might know where I'm going for this, but let's let Ben continue because he had more to say.
Because we now live in a world where we do not have a shared reality. This was a point that was made by an account on Twitter called Wocal Distance. And he's saying that we don't have a shared reality because half the people saw this clip and they were offended by it, and half the people are like, woohoo, it's amazing. Okay, that shared reality has gone away on literally everything. And you have to understand that without that shared reality, we can't have political conversations, we can't have shared values. It's very difficult to see how you have a future as a country if you don't have some sort of shared value. And so the degradation of that, like why doesn't she personally have the respect for the instrument and a respect for the history enough not to twerk with it.
Why she does not have enough respect for our history to not twerk with it. Again, maybe I'm on the Cory Booker line. You can be offended by it all you want. You can be upset that she did that and degraded James Madison's flute. You can feel that way, but you should think about why you feel that way. And I think Ben tried to analyze why he feels that way, and that's where he came up with. Allow me to offer you guys an alternate explanation here. He talked about the gentility, the history of our country. Let's go into some of that gentility of our founding fathers, specifically James Madison. He was born into a plantation society entirely predicated on slave labor, both sides of his family having made their fortunes in tobacco farming. When his grandfather, Ambrose Madison, died under mysterious circumstances, 3 of his slaves were convicted for allegedly poisoning him. So grandfather's gone. Ambrose, his son, and James Madison's father, also named James Madison, was at one time the richest landowner in Orange County, Virginia, owning 5,000 acres tended by slaves. When he married, his new wife, Nellie Conway, brought about a dozen more slaves to the household. James Madison is known for having declarations and speaking out against the institution of slavery in America. In 1787, at the Constitutional Convention, Madison argued that the slave trade was dishonorable to the national character. He further contended that slaves should not be taxed because it would be wrong to admit in the Constitution the idea that there could be property in men. Slaves, he reasoned, were not like merchandise and were not consumed and thus could not be held as property. What a good guy. Founding father, respect him, Lizzo, and stop touching his damn flute. Really though? In February of 1801, Madison Sr., James Madison, the president's dad, died, leaving Montpelier and more than 100 slaves to James Madison as his eldest son. The following week, Thomas Jefferson became president of the United States and appointed Madison as the Secretary of State. Madison managed Montpelier from afar, yet took no concrete steps toward freeing his slaves or changing the plantation system. Upon becoming the 4th president of the United States in 1809, Madison brought slaves to serve him in the White House. And lastly, there's this other part, because we're talking about the gentility of our founding fathers. We're talking about the vulgarity of our American history and the degradation of our presidents like James Madison. Betty Kearse is a descendant of James Madison's. She's a writer, a storyteller. She wrote this. According to the history told by 8 generations of my family's griots, Madison had a relationship with one of his slaves, Corinne, that resulted in the birth of a son, Jim, who was sold and sent away when he was a teenager. Jim was my great grandfather. So we want Lizzo and other folks that look like her and other folks who do the music like her that many people don't like to stop degrading the history of our country, to stop changing the gentility of our founding fathers, and stop touching James Madison's historic flute. James Madison had no gentility towards the slaves that he owned. He had no respect. He degraded their lives. There was murders, there was rapes, there was killing, there was selling of his son that after he raped one of his slaves off into more slavery. There was lots of talk about how wonderful he was surrounding the institution of slavery in the country, but he didn't follow with his own actions. In fact, even after he died, his wife then kept those same slaves that they promised to emancipate and all that other stuff that they never actually did. So you have to ask yourself, you want black folks, let's go ahead and say it, to honor our founding fathers when our founding fathers had no effing thought process to honor our ancestors. Where's that gentility? Where's that history? Where's that degradation? It was already practiced a long time ago. But shaking your ass while you're playing a flute, that's the problem. What are your thoughts there? Now that you're back, Ivana, I apologize for that diatribe.
No, it's okay, absolutely. On the aspect of American history and vulgarity, like at first I was thinking, how on earth could you see American history and not already see how vulgar it is? But I recognize now that Ben Shapiro follows the American history that teaches kids that George Washington had wooden teeth and not the actual history of George Washington ripping teeth out of his slaves and using those teeth to make dentures. Now let me be petty for 1 second. Is Ben Shapiro going through a divorce? Does he have COVID? He looks disgusting in that video. He's not in his studio where he's usually got his multicam shot for no reason. He's in his house, and it's always smart to have the lighting behind you when you're recording. But like, he's unshaven, he looks greasy. I mean, I don't know if he was just like, he was sitting on his phone in the morning and saw Lizzo playing the flute, and he was so outraged he just had to run unshowered, unshaven to record this video, or what the hell is happening there. But also the idea that we're meant to think that he gives a singular crap about a flute he never heard of until the day he recorded that is just beyond me. And he says, I would be so upset if someone twerked on a Stradivarius. Now, I don't know if he saw a clip, I did not, but I didn't see Lizzo do any sort of Allison Hannigan American Pie stuff with that flute. She shook her butt a tiny bit. And returned it. Like it wasn't vulgar. It wasn't, and there was no controversy. People clicked that video because they were like, oh my God. It says that she made history. She played an entirely crystal flute. That's cool. And like, let's be honest, this is probably the first time so many people who follow Lizzo heard of the Library of Congress. And now they're learning about things at the Library of Congress. Does. But then one last point. He says the clip of her playing the flute at the Library of Congress didn't go viral. That video has 3 million views on Twitter alone. And that's just one clip of it. Another clip I saw of it posted by someone else had 4 million views. That video went just as viral as the video of her on stage. So, I mean, that was just a lie to, back up his ridiculous argument.